I would like to just give a brief introduction from our side and start with the agenda. For those who don't know me, my name is Marc, and I have the pleasure to be the CEO of TrustSquare since last June. Today we will have 3 brackets. So we start with an introduction to DePIN by Marc Ballandies. Then we have keynotes, so high intensity, quick fire takeaways. And then we'll do a panel. And then obviously we go into the most important part, which is apro and networking, which you already started a bit. Good. So welcome. As mentioned, for those who are not connected yet, please do, or do it later. At TrustSquare, we are an innovation hub. So we bring together the different stakeholders and different perspectives into one area, because we are a firm believer that the future of innovation is collaborative. So it's not that one company with their own in-house teams will do everything end-to-end and maintain it and keep it best in class going forward, but that you need to work in an ecosystem and with other parties. So that's really what drives us. We are also, even though we have a strong background in blockchain, by now we are tech agnostic, because we also believe that you should start with a problem that is worth solving for somebody who has a really urgent problem there, and then solve the tech later, right? So first, why are we doing this? And then how, a little bit in the second step. And it's 3 things that we have. One is what you're experiencing, everything about corporate innovation. How can we bring emerging tech to the big corporations? Because we believe that mass adoption comes through corporate adoptions. They have the credibility, they have the money, they have the access to the clients. And that's what we need to bring any technology to the masses. Then the second piece is events that we do also for others, right? So sometimes we have press conferences here, sometimes other conferences, sometimes closed format, presentations from the tenants upstairs and whatnot. And then also obviously office space, you see it a little bit on this side, but most is on the other side with regards to private offices with a Bahnhofstrasse address, but also just walk in and work for an hour or 2. And as mentioned, like it's really bringing everyone together. So the corporates who have oftentimes the challenge, the adoption partners, startups, protocols, LLM providers, whoever, who have answers, academia that can help to widen the angle and not be just too focused on what is possible today, but maybe also consider what is possible tomorrow. And then last but not least, and I think increasingly important, the wider ecosystem, which also includes government that do define the rules, and especially in emerging tech, it's so important to have the rules that it's helpful, but also for the government and the regulators to understand why you want something maybe from the tech side in a certain way, and have this discussion and open it up. And that brings us maybe also to today. So you are experiencing the first DePIN Day, which will become a series, which has 2 elements. We just had a closed circle deep dive session in an open space technology format, which I come to in a second. And now you're obviously part of the DePIN.Sparx. And already, Marc, maybe 16 to 18 September, there will be an unconference, which means one part will be set agenda, but half or even more will be unset agenda. So this really means the people joining, they make the agenda on the spot. Looks a bit like this. This is from last week, 10th of March, 3rd of March actually, where we were here in a big circle, 150 people, and discussing, bringing topics that then go to the wall and are into 8 different tracks, broken out ad hoc on the spot. Something I didn't know until June, until I joined TrustSquare. So if you have also never heard of it, super, super interesting. And this is when it looks a bit. But then that was just like 2 hours ago. So we were sitting in the back, having the smaller circle and discussing what is moving the decentralized energy, what are some pressing questions that we were able to address. With this, I would hand over to Marc. Thank you so much for curating everything tonight and guiding us through. Marc, stage is yours.
Thanks, Marc. Yeah, I have an academic background, so the agenda today is quite packed, so I'm trying to make it quick so that the other speakers have some more room. I have the honor to introduce the topic of DePIN. So as Marc said, we are trying to bring, to be this melting pot of corporate adoption, startups, academia, and for many, even in the blockchain space, DePIN is a new concept, a new vertical. So I'm giving a quick intro into it. So what is DePIN? And DePIN are decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Yeah, so building infrastructure such as 5G networks, energy grids, sensor networks. And it got all started, this narrative, with Helium. It's a blockchain project which incentivized people to place physical LoRaWAN gateways. And here we see a map of the area they are covering, or they covered at some point. And they basically used blockchain tokens. So they gave people blockchain tokens, people placed these physical hardware devices in their house, and they built this decentralized network. And that's one of the things which characterizes DePINs. They're using blockchain technology, so token incentives, decentralized governance, and also properties of the blockchain, like immutable data storage and these things. And the message of this slide is it's already stepping out. So crypto is stepping out, and they're like Helium is in cooperation with T-Mobile, for example, in the US, also in Mexico with a bigger company. So like these DePIN systems, they're stepping out. That's the message here. And there's not just Helium. By now, there are over 500 projects building in the space. So it's really a lot of things happening. And that's the reason why we're also today here. And we're trying this, initiating in Switzerland these DePIN days, and to inform each other a bit more. Okay, so what is a DePIN? Now a quick deep dive. The first thing, it's about these physical assets. Here's like an example from Onokoi. What Onokoi is doing, they're improving the positioning you can obtain from GPS. Yeah, GPS is only accurate up to some meters because of atmospheric delays, like weather and like these things. And there's an established technology which uses RTK. It's a reference station which knows exactly where it is. It receives the same signal, can calculate a correction term, and share it with nearby devices. And in this setup, you can obtain sub-centimeter positioning in sub-seconds. Yeah, it's established technology with an established market, but there's no global and dense infrastructure for that yet. Only regional coverage. And what Onokoi is doing now, they are building with the community this decentralized network in the Helium style, so to say. That's the first take on DePIN. It's about these physical assets. Yeah, it's not virtual anymore, it's physical. Second thing is, example, DePINs usually, and this adds a lot of complexity, one can see them as these three-sided markets. So you have on the one end infrastructure providers, like these reference stations, maintainers, people who deploy them. Then you have people who use them to produce a service, and then you have a demand side. And for Weiher, for example, a weather intelligence platform, these different communities are quite different. So we have on the supply side, blockchain enthusiasts, hardware geeks, yeah, so like very particular type of people placing these stations. On the service side, you have professors and meteorologists from Meteo Swiss, for example, doing forecasts with this data. And on the demand side, you can have insurance companies or drone companies. So it's like a really complex network, and you need to satisfy all of these three sides. So DePINs are these three-sided markets, which makes them quite complex. You can, from a theoretical point of view, these are complex systems. And in order to steer and navigate these systems, one can use decentralized governance, breaking up the complexity in smaller components. And the main idea, or like an example, why this can make sense is like, again, with Onokoi, placing these reference stations and maintaining them as a centralized entity is quite expensive. Yeah, you need like $10,000 per station per year. Yeah, and if you want to have it in all the world, these are quite huge operational costs. What Onokoi is doing is basically using the community. So each individual maintains the station on their own, not by the central entity. And through this, you have a much reduced operational costs. Okay, and then how is all of these coordinated? Like usually these systems, they use tokens. Yeah, so token as a coordination tool. Here's one example, a two-token model, how this could look like. For example, people who maintain these reference stations, they receive a token. This token maybe is like a share, you can participate in governance, but you also need the token to, in the end, access the system service. And through this, you create a market. You have those who want to get the system service, they need this token. You have some people who earn these tokens through providing reference station data, a bit like the Bitcoin idea with mining. Yeah, so that's what is happening here. And actually, what these tokens are doing, they are doing two things. So one, you can crowd finance the investment cost in such a network. Yeah, so you don't need to have all the capital to build something out. And at the same time, these tokens can function as an information signal, so it can facilitate self-organization. That's a theoretical view on it. So I come to an end. It sounds all great, but there are also many challenges, and one of them is like this crypto problem in general. So we again like building very often out the supply, and we're not really thinking about the demand side of the users of the products. So there's a lot of challenges on this end. And my personal view on it is like that one really needs to clearly know where one is positioned in the value chain. So when you collect data, you should have a clear idea in which data market you're going, because most data markets are not in existence, so data usually has no value. Or you build intelligence services on top, and what we discussed today, for example, on the demand side, also carbon credit systems could be a business model on the demand side. So these are things one needs to consider, and this is what we are, oh, my slides are back, we're trying to do here. As Marc was showing at the beginning, bringing different stakeholder groups together to basically find really out also this demand side, what is actually doable and necessary. And this we had covered. And this is like my main meme I want to give out. So I think Switzerland is famous for its infrastructure. Yeah, so like the tunnel construction led to huge economic prosperity in Switzerland, also cultural connection between different parts, and the financial industry got boosted to this, but also the ETH got famous for its engineering through the Gotthard tunnel construction. So physical infrastructure is a deeply Swiss thing. It's a trend which is happening out there, and I think the discussion and the definition what DePIN is and in which path it's going, there's no better place than Switzerland, and I'm very happy that we're all here together for this. So with this, I will hand over now into the decentralized energy domain, in which I'm not an expert. I'm handing over to Mevina, I think.
Thank you, Marc. Hello, everyone. My name is Mevina. I'm with Amstein Walthert. That's one of the largest building technology companies, like engineering companies in Switzerland. We have about 1,200 people working between Geneva and Frauenfeld. So it's covering all Switzerland and a little bit of France. I'm really glad that Marc covered DePIN a little bit, because it means that I'm not the only one who doesn't know what it is. So I'm going to talk to you from a completely different perspective. We are engineering, as I said, and planning and consulting building owners, for example, on realizing their decentralized energy infrastructure. And I'm going to talk about 3 different specific elements of decentralized energy infrastructure and what problems and challenges we encounter there. This is a list of all kinds of different competences that we as Amstein and Walthert cover when it comes into energy. I know I'm not going to read this to you because I want to dive into the 3 topics. So one of the topics that we cover is solar energy. This is a typical situation we encounter, buildings with apartments somewhere in Switzerland. Our role is engineering and consulting. We help them to, first of all, design the panels. Where should they put them? How could they put them on the building? Is it on the roof or on the facade? If it's on the roof, is it flat or is it straight up? And also we help them to establish local communities to consume their energy together. So some of the challenges that we encounter, one of the first challenges actually is with architects, for example. Are they willing and able to introduce or to incorporate PV panels into their design? It's not always very easy, and sometimes it's even a fight about it. No, we need. And now there are also legal terms where would say that different buildings, they have to have a certain minimum of PV production. Another challenge is with local grids. How much electricity from PV panels are they able to integrate into the grid? And the third challenge that I want to mention is, obviously, we need more electricity in the future in the winter and not in the summer. With PV production, we usually have a peak in the summer. So how can we design those PV plants also on buildings so that it's optimized for winter production? So more on the south facade or maybe put them straight up on the roof, which again looks a bit different maybe than what the architect had in mind. Another topic is electric mobility. Here we discuss with building owners how they could prepare their infrastructure for charging stations, for example. And one of the biggest challenges here is if the buildings have different owners and every owner has to accept and pay for their share to actually build this infrastructure in the building. Yeah, that's one of the biggest discussions that we have in this topic. Now, if we talk about electric mobility and solar energy, then there is also a question of how can we manage the energy consumption locally? Energy management systems, what are the systems that are on the market? What can they provide? What do they include? Do they include price signals or not? How is the user interface with the person actually using the car or loading the dishwasher? So I think there's a lot of development also potential there. Now I've talked about electricity, but another thing is also the heating system, which also has a lot of connections to the electricity infrastructure. This is a picture of a building, a construction site of a city in Switzerland, Baden, for a new hospital building. And there is a separate building on this site for the energy power plant, the heating power plant. The heating system of this hospital is relying on geothermal probes, like a large heat pump. And for active cooling, they use waste heat from a wood power plant outside, like somewhere behind the woods here. And then they take this heat and with absorption chillers, they make cooling systems. So they use the waste heat from a different power plant to produce heat in the summer, which is a perfect synergy situation. They also built some, now it's almost finished, this is the picture of a few years ago. They also built some PV panels on the facade and on the roofs. And one of the challenges we encounter with this kind of sites or projects is how can we find the optimum of all kinds of different energy sources around us connected to the needs that are local. Like here for a hospital, for example, they need heating energy. Sometimes they need high temperature, like 110 degrees Celsius. And they also need cooling, because obviously hospital environments, they need certain rooms to be accurately climatized. And our aim is always to be as decarbonized as possible, to introduce and use all kinds of local renewable energy sources. And also for a plant of this size, it's very difficult to manage the whole energy system with the different users in the different buildings. There are buildings with the hospital beds, there are buildings with the OPs. Do you call them OPs in English also? Operation rooms. And also beds for people, like living residential buildings. There are all kinds of different needs. How does this whole energy management system work for a plant like this or for a area like this? So our aim, as I said, is to shape also the energy supply and the energy landscape of Switzerland, to decarbonize the energy system. And my message is a bit harsh, but I think if we don't have these kind of energy projects first, we are not able to decentralize the system in a DePIN way. And now I'm really looking forward to the discussions that we have afterwards and to see the different perspectives on it also. Thanks.
Okay, Fredrik is my name. I'm from Sweden. It's not that far, and most people anyway think Sweden and Switzerland are the same thing. But I'm representing Sourceful Energy, and we are one of the major DePIN projects within the energy space, I would say. And what we're doing is essentially trying to fill that void, which is already discussed here. And that is creating a solution that actually can tackle the challenges that come with renewable power. I always show this picture, and this is actually the same graph you will find in The Economist from somewhere in the fall, and it's the global growth of the cumulative added capacity of solar PV in the world. And it's not a meme coin that we're seeing. It's the actually power that is being installed in solar PV. And the small green lines is always the projection. So every year, the International Energy Agency tries to predict the future. And you always think in linear terms, and it's not how the world works. We are, I would say, just in the beginning of an S-curve. So people that know about S-curves, they see this and okay, we haven't, like, it won't stop now, we have just started. And this is the cool part, is that subsidies aren't really needed anymore. Solar PV is already the cheapest power option. Obviously, not when it's dark, when it's like cloudy, or if you live in a northern country when there isn't too much sun. So solar PV isn't the solution to everything. But it's extremely cheap. Batteries are getting cheap as well. So we don't need to subsidize these things. It's already working. When we see this trend, and we see that market economics has its play, this technology, and we have some energy companies in here, what this technology actually does is that it's creating problems for the traditional players. And when I say problems, yeah, traditional energy companies, they've always owned everything. So they own the centralized power production, they own the power plants, and everyone is just a consumer, and you're getting billed per energy. And this is changing, because the more and more decentralized energy production, more than 50% of this is actually installed on rooftops, which is also a quite interesting story. This has nothing to do with blockchain. This is a technology that is decentralized at its core. The more energy that it's produced, not by the people that used to produce it, they lose power. They still need to maintain that grid, because if the grid fails, we don't call our neighbor, we call the utility company and say that I'm so disappointed, I want power. So this creates a narrative. We are, by the way, not selling solar PV installations. We are not selling batteries. We aim to be part of the solution for what we see on this picture. That's it. So don't call me if you want to install solar PV. I won't be able to help you. In essence, what we want to make possible is to create a system where we can incentivize each and every one that installs decentralized energy production or generation or even consumption in an effective way. And I think that's really what I believe the core part of what DePIN is making, I would say, systems more cost effective. We can deploy systems, networks with less capital. That's what it all boils down to. Like, why were Helium a successful story? We can debate if they are successful or not, but at least they have formed the space. Yeah, people, without getting a paycheck, were installing hotspots. They did it themselves. And that's extremely lot cheaper than employing lots of technicians that are like on a paycheck, and you need to have contracts and lease agreements and et cetera, et cetera. So it is more capital efficient. The same, I would say, applies for energy and small decentralized energy resources. So connecting a large battery park or a large solar farm, the utilities already have that play in their back pocket. It's from the technical perspective, it's not hard. But let's say we have maybe 5-10 million new balcony solar installations happening in Germany. Could be even more. And that trend might also continue to other countries. 2 or 3 solar panels which you can put on your balcony. How do we create an effective system of coordinating these? And then the question is, let's leave it to the utilities. And how many was it? Like 630 districts all just in Switzerland. There are about 160, I think, in Sweden. Which of them should create that system? Or should they agree on a system and develop it? And then the countries are interconnected as well. And the thing here is that it needs to be a consumer solution, doesn't it? Like the utilities, they bill users for their energy users. But this should be a solution where you should be able to join in without asking your utility, right? That's what we aim to build. So what we are building now, we are still in an early stage. We've just secured our seed phase and are beginning to find our product market fit. So we are, like I got that question earlier, are you making any money? No, we are not. We are in that position when we try to find the product market fit, and that's sort of the definition of a seed stage company. What we're doing at the moment is that all the yellow dots here, and we can see in the US as well, we are connecting and building supply. Exactly what you talked about. Yeah, we don't have the demand yet. We need to find the demand. But truly believe that we're on to take a real world problem, that there is no, I would say, scalable solution that exists today. What we're doing is that we have a consumer-facing approach. That's also part of what I believe. If you ask people what is DePIN, one of the things that I believe DePIN is, it should be a consumer product. And a consumer product for me means that you should be able to join permissionless, like anyone should be able to join. You shouldn't be able to get permission from someone to join. Then it's really not a DePIN project, at least in my view. So anyone can buy a gateway. The gateway is just a hardware device that controls your energy assets, reads and controls data from your battery or solar PV. Loads of different products on the market that does the same thing. So that's not I would say, the innovative part. We also have, we call it the SAP, but it's basically a P1 meter. Already 10, maybe 20, I could probably be wrong, more products on the market that does the same thing. Connects to the utility meter, reads the data from the standard interface in Europe now called the P1 or AEGIS HAN port. That gives real-time data. And that's basically a way for us to let you as a user own your data, which you are not now. You're just getting billed for it. So that's what we're doing, a consumer-facing approach. So 1 minute left. I'm going to just show you this very quickly. You can download our app, and the point here is that you shouldn't be able to ask anyone. You should be able to join. And this is actually the story of I would say more or less every single product on the market that operates in the VPP space. It's industrial hardware. You're often relying on distributed networks. You need to have an electrician or maybe a utility company that you actually need to be a customer at as well. And it's extremely hard for you as a customer to just join something. There is a lot of ifs and buts on the way. We want to make that easier. So this is just an insight on the data that we're sharing now. At this point, we haven't really bothered about GDPR and such yet. We will end up in that. So I might want to talk to you about that. But anyhow, we're feeding extreme amounts of data from an energy system, and we're actually using many data sources enabled to at least have a better way of the validation approach. Should we trust the utility meter? Yeah, of course, we can trust the utility meter. Utility companies does. But yeah, if we, on top of this, also feed data from devices that are within your energy in your home, we can actually use that data to validate also the utility meter and vice versa. So that is what we're doing as well. That's more or less all from me, so I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. So here comes the corporate dinosaur. My name is Simon Weiher, lead innovation at Switzerland's largest energy utility. So we are the ones who have the big grids and the big assets. And just to show that we came to the age of Gen AI, we can actually do pictures, right? We got there. So what I want to speak about quickly is just to really talk about the challenges that we observe with decentralized energy assets. And no, it's not necessarily that we say everything's bad that's happening out there with decentral assets. We actually see a role for us to be in that space and to be a coordinator in that space. And I'll get into why that is in just a second. Let's just talk about the couple of areas that can be there decentrally. So decentral solar, isn't that a beautiful thing? Everyone puts it on their own rooftop. Couldn't be any nicer. We've solved it all. Reality is that if you speak to people who have solar on their rooftop today, they will face some challenges with the commercial viability of that, because the more solar we have, the less worth it has. If you look at power prices today and the more solar we have, it's just always correlated. When does solar produce the most power? It does it at noon, so power prices go negative. Or let's say in Switzerland it didn't happen too often yet, but Germany in 2024 had 457 hours of negative power prices. And as a society, we won't forever be able to compensate people for putting solar power into our grids and actually be compensated at those hours, right? As a utility, I'm actually paying money for someone who I'm paying twice, right? Someone gives me solar electricity at times where the power price is negative. So I pay to the exchanges and I pay to the person who's put the solar roof panel on his rooftop. And in fact, it's even socially a problem, because who's paying the electricity bill? Everyone. Who's getting the benefit? The rich owners of single houses that could afford to put a PV panel on their rooftop and even get subsidies for it. So it really becomes a bit of a social topic. And no, PV panels in Switzerland are still being subsidized. They are not by its own economical. And then if we always feed at noontime, that does challenge some of the distribution grids. Not today. We've been quite luxurious in how we designed distribution grids, so they are not yet hitting the limits, but we'll get to a point where we need to be smart about when we allow power flows into the distribution grids unrestrained. And fortunately, the electricity law that has just been passed allows now to actually curtail some of the PV production that comes from rooftops. And this is something necessary. And I strongly believe this is something that has to be actually done centrally, that curtailment. We need to be able to centrally be able to see how the grid's doing, where do we need curtailment, where do we not need curtailment. So that's decentral solar. Then obviously we charge decentrally, and that's a beautiful thing, because this is probably the best, this is how EV is the most comfortable way to drive an electric vehicle, is by charging it at home. And we install wall boxes, right? We do benefit from the uptake of electric mobility, and we as an electricity supplier, we're certainly the last one to say electricity mobility wouldn't work. The challenge that comes with it, and that requires coordination, is that if we get to, some forecasts might say 2 million electric vehicles in Switzerland by 2035, if all those come home at 6 p.m. and plug in their car, and even if it's only 11 kilowatt chargers, you can do the math, that would be quite disastrous for our distribution grids, for maybe even for our transmission grids. We strongly believe that at some point we need to get to a mode where there is smart charging being applied, where we have an incentive to be smart on when my car charges. And as long as I know that the next morning it's loaded and it's charged up so I can drive again around, there will be some acceptance in the public. But still, there is something to be coordinated here. Then, decentral batteries. That should solve the problem, right? If I have a solar rooftop, then I get a battery on top, and then I'm not feeding in at noon. Yes, that is, but again, it needs a bit of coordination, and I'll quickly explain why that is. A couple of German utilities have actually figured that what happens with the decentral batteries is that you put a battery that has about 1, 2, 3 hours capacity at full load or from your solar panels. So what happens is you start loading your battery at 8 a.m. in the morning, and it loads and loads and loads. And at 11 a.m., your battery is full, and bam, the entire PV production goes into the grid. And I, as an electric utility who hasn't even seen your battery, I'm completely surprised. From one moment to the next, I get your full 15, 20, 25 kilowatts from your rooftop suddenly in my grid. So I better know about your decentral battery, and I'm in a position to manage your decentral battery, or at least be aware of it. And then, last but not least, and this is a bit the difference between building a network of your example with the satellite data or the example of Helium. If one of those doesn't work, it's not necessarily critical. I'll just use another node. If your electricity supply, you want it to be 99.9999% available. And we, as a utility, we're standing there and guaranteeing that. And if you want to be independent from the grid, totally grid independent, you're a billionaire who has a huge hydrogen tank in their basement, or you have plenty of these lovely devices, but you'll never be completely grid access free. You will always want that insurance policy, and that also means that you'll always need to pay for that insurance policy. It's a different story than from mobile networks or anything else. So I strongly believe that everyone who wants a economically efficiently built backup system will want a central grid. And I'm happy to debate that. Essentially, I think there's great elements in decentral. Decentral does great in many things, but I think there's a central nerve system that we'll need. And we have plenty of solutions for that. I also think there's plenty of VPP companies out there, as you already rightfully mentioned, Fredrik, be it the Octopus Energies, be it the 1.5s in Germany. So there's plenty of solutions out there, and we'll need to find where DePIN is a solution, but I'm happy to debate that. And yes, obviously I'm the corporate dinosaur here, so prove me wrong. Thank you.
Hello, there we go. Okay, my name is McCan, and I'm here representing the AEGIS Alliance. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are first, and then I will give you our approach to DePIN and also an example that we're currently working on. So the AEGIS Alliance essentially is a consulting firm. We brought together some people from very disparate fields, and the reason we did that was because we didn't see organizations like this existing, and we wanted to tackle different problems. My background is in blockchain. I spent about 5 years working for the Cardano Foundation. Before that, in 2015, I made a Litecoin clone and so on. So I'm intimately familiar with the technology. I like putting it to good use. I don't like the use of blockchain where it's not necessary, and I've seen a lot of that. So I like real world grounded examples, and this is what attracted me to DePIN. In the room also, you'll see Mauro and Domino. Please go up to them and pick their brain. They have a wonderful perspective on all of this. And then Gareth is the glue that brought us all together. So from the AEGIS Alliance, we look at certification and compliance, and you'll see from the example of what I'm talking about how we get to certification using DePIN. I think it's quite a novel approach. And then also strategic consultancy, and you can read the slide, right? But we wanted to provide a facility that I don't think it really exists by combining all of these wonderful people together. So this is a DePIN conference. I want to talk a little bit about our approach to DePIN. One of the things that I've noticed, I've been programming since I was 10 years old, and I'm 45 now, so that's quite a long time. I've been involved in blockchain for quite a while, tech, general, and all of that. Things are accelerating, and when I look at the world now, I think that we implicitly trust devices. We implicitly trust our phone, our Samsung TV that we trust, and we don't know if someone's watching us on our Samsung TV in the camera. And I think this is a worrying thing. To me it is, anyway. We trust AI. They don't know how it works on the inside. They know how to generate the models and all of the rest, but if you grab anyone, senior guy from Google, they'll tell you on the inside, we don't know. So The approach that we took to DePIN was about how do we trust the devices if we're going to use them to serve our purpose. So we started with a mathematical model at the lowest level. So the opcodes of a processor, we generate a mathematical model of how that functions, okay? Then we take that mathematical model and generate a commitment. So based on that, you can tell the true functioning of that processor and the program that's running on it. Okay, so if there's any deviation from the functioning of that processor, you will know about it. For example, if I inject malware into the firmware, we will know. The proofs will fail. So in that line, we then generate function hiding zero knowledge proofs. The majority of the blockchain industry uses input hiding functional commitments. Whereas for us, we're using function hiding functional commitments, which is based on a research paper by Dan Boney in Stanford that came out about 3.5 years ago. So what this allows us to do is give away no information about what's actually happening on the CPU, but prove that it's functioning as it was supposed to, okay? From this, we take those proofs and we stream them to a blockchain. The reason we do that is because there's multiple reasons. One, you want to leverage the features that a blockchain has, the transparency, the immutability, but also because it's a distributed network, it allows for independent verification. Someone can independently verify that a processor is functioning as intended without knowing what it's actually doing, which I think is pretty interesting and cool. So where this applies and where we focus in this area is on, one, verifiable computing. We think that because the things are accelerating, we don't know, people trust their devices, we want to be able for them to prove that their devices are working as intended. The second one is security. Should there be anomalous behavior in your program, then we will be able to detect that because the proofs will fail. And the third one is fraud prevention. So I can give an example of that later or just come up and talk to me. But what we do and what we've been working on in the AEGIS Alliance, we work with a hydrogen company in Australia. This hydrogen company, they've been established for 30 years, nuclear scientists. They have created a non-decaying catalyst that turns hydrogen, oxygen, and small amounts of argon into massive amounts of heat without combustion. Right, so they have a groundbreaking technology. We decided we wanted to work with them and figure out how we can assure them that their devices are working as intended. Where this applies is for critical things, right? This is like when I look at why would you be interested in DePIN? A heart monitor, I think that's very important. Medical devices, hydrogen devices, the consequences are high if they don't function as intended. So for us, we started building this into their hardware. There's two ways you can do this. You can either connect in, or they can compile it into the firmware, or we can connect through a hardware interface. They have the Siemens 2050 gateway, and that's where we generate the proofs, right? What this actually means is that, one, they can prove the true functioning of their hydrogen device. But beyond that, it allows them to create an autonomous pipeline to the blockchain of proofs of the functioning of that device. So essentially, if you know that device is functioning as intended, then you can, over time, receive those proofs and roll them up into certification. So we are certifying those devices as functioning as intended. And that's one of the key things. This autonomous pipeline removes human assessments. So if you think about on the carbon credit market, so everyone's, I think, somewhat familiar about the assessments of Vera and other companies and how they go about it. If you can take from the actual device to certification to carbon credits without human interaction and have an autonomous pipeline, that's a powerful thing because it removes fraud. And this is one of the things that I was very much drawn to, was having an autonomous pipeline from these devices that's secure, that allows you to understand and prove that your devices are doing what they're supposed to. And that's it. So thank you.
So
So my name is Hanmin. I'm currently leading a group on controlling automation at Empa. So Empa is a research institute affiliated to the ETH domain. We are located in the suburb of Zurich. Today I'm representing the academia silo, but I promise there's no formula here. I'll be talking about data-driven control for decentralized energy system. So thanks to the introduction of the previous speaker, I hope you can bear with me on the general context. Here, I'm taking some statistics from the International Energy Agency. These are statistics basically saying energy flexibility from batteries and demand response will grow more than around 10 times between 2020 and 2030. Because we are decommissioning all these fossil fuel power plants, which does a good job in the traditionally behind the scene to keep our system up and running 99.999% of the time, as Simon mentioned. And once they are decommissioned, there's a void space that these distributed energy resources would fill in. On the right-hand side, some more statistics from the International Energy Agency. That means roughly 11 billion of smart appliances would be useful and need to be active in such context. So that's a vast amount of distributed energy resources, as Fredrik also hinted, that could be spread globally. So there are opportunities, but at the same time, it also means a lot of challenges, because finding a solution, controlling automation solutions that can cover efficiently, scalably 11 billion of smart appliances is not a trivial task. And I will tell you more in the concrete examples. Now, let me try to show you some experimental results, how we deploy and develop and deploy our scalable control and automation techniques in a residential context. So Simon mentioned it earlier, there would be distributed decentral components such as batteries, such as rooftop PV panels. Here I'm showing some tests we carry out in our demonstrator. Basically, imagine you have a smart home energy management system. You can control the room temperature, you can control the EV charging, you can control the battery or hot water tank in your houses. And what we did is developing this data-driven control algorithm. What does that mean? Imagine you walk in this room, you anticipate that there will be a large cloud, a large amount of people coming into this room. You would decide not to heat before this event, because we are generating a lot of energy. So such kind of scalable control algorithms basically take into account these forecasts of events, forecasts of weather. Then it can smartly regulate the temperatures in the rooms. And this is as an example, we can deploy the same automation systems basically to roll out in Switzerland. There are also more than 1 million of households. And if we have such kind of control solutions, we can roll it out easily to make sure that if you're a house owner, you want to optimize according to your PV injection to improve the self-consumption of your PV or respond to electricity price, you can do that. I want to go into the details on the technical part, but just to highlight that in a concrete example, as I mentioned earlier, controlling the temperature as an example, how do we incorporate the predictive knowledge? How do we incorporate state-of-the-art algorithms to make sure you can roll it out and perform such energy management in a more efficient way? And basically here shows the preheating of the space and not use heating if you are anticipating some to rise or people to arrive in a large amount. Now, those control and automation techniques basically form the basis for us to support, to fill in the void space because of the decommission of large power plants, because we can consume in a smarter way when energy is available, etc. So what we also did as experiments to test things out, considering that you have battery, PV, bidirectional electric vehicle, uncontrollable loads such as lights, your computer. And then we can use the technique mentioned earlier to effectively to package everything in your house, pack it as and sell it as a service to the system that you can later get remuneration, as Fredrik was hinting earlier. And we do it more from the perspective of predictive control, that you can take into account future knowledges. Now, this slide is a bit crowded, but let me try to give you the intuition behind it. So let's imagine on a Friday afternoon, you want to go back home and the roads are congested. So what you can do is, of course, find a smart traffic system or find a traffic police that can smartly regulate the traffic so everyone can leave and go back home happily. And think of these red zones as the bars that you saw on the Google map. Maybe it's congested, so you just shift to the different roads, and then you do not congest and you are happy going back home. So essentially, this is what this graph is doing in a more automatic way. You see there will be a road congestion. So you drive your car smartly to avoid those, and everyone is happy in the end. Okay, so as said, as an example, of course, with this automation system, we can then pack all these resources and provide it as a service to the system. On the right-hand side, representing the utilities or grid operator, on the right-hand side, you see how this energy management system would work. And yeah, of course, this would be only possible with this advanced control and automation system that can take into account this additional knowledge or forecast. That will be the end. Next.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. My name is Nicolas. So I work at the National Electricity System Operator in the UK and act as a strategy lead. So the purpose of today, it is called the panel conversation. But the idea is that we as a group are going to ask those two guys a couple of questions. So maybe some people would not want to ask a question, but to lower the bar, Marc has asked me to start asking them a couple of questions just to warm them up, and then I'll pass the mic to you. I think in our energy transition, we all know that, so the way it started on the big generation side, we have large-scale wind generation and large-scale solar. On the demand side, we have PVs on top of houses, and then we have storage. And then what we are seeing now is that all of this renewable energy generation, so it's intermittent. So we are introducing a new kind of character to the power grid, and we have to deal with that. So at times of day, on different days, on different seasons, the grid, it's so much harder to balance the electricity supply and demand, and we have to do that 99.9999% of the time, 365 days a year. So we need to make sure that our grids are a bit more flexible to do this, and this is called flexibility, and there's multiple ways to deal with that. The distributed energy resources, in my opinion, are one of the best source of flexibility that we have for the grid. Interconnectors are another one. Large storage is another one. But I think I'll go to Simon. And I think in your presentation, and we do this in the energy sector, we love to talk about the problems and the challenges, and particularly on DERs, maybe I would like to start. So you mentioned a couple of the challenges, but I would like maybe you can talk about a couple of the opportunities we have with the deployment of DERs.
Yeah, sure. One of the opportunities is that as a system operator, obviously the capital investment I would have to make is relatively limited, right? When I build a battery, like a grid scale battery into the transmission grid, then I pay for that battery. But if I'm able to facilitate and manage an armada of batteries, then obviously that is more interesting for me from a capital point of view. And the reason why rooftop solar, that's one, but then the other reason why rooftop solar is so popular in Switzerland so far, at least, is because we're hardly able to build anything else. It's just the most acceptable source of additional build in Switzerland these days. We'd love to build a few more wind turbines, but it's bloody hard.
Thank you. And I think just to maybe focus a little bit on the concept of DePIN, I think maybe I will pass on to Fredrik, but we had some really good presentation on Sourceful, and we had some really good presentation on Weiher and on Oncoloy. But I was just wondering, you are an energy expert, and there's so many use cases where we have decentralized hardwares, mostly nowadays in the energy sector. And I was just wondering if you can give us a couple of more use cases for DePIN in the energy sector, and then if there's any trends or anything like that you see, if you can share them with us.
It's that's actually it's a big question. Obviously, you focus on very much on what you're doing yourself, but what I would say is there are so many things that haven't been monetized that could be monetized. I think that everyone is speaking about data nowadays. We all know that there is a value in the data, but we are not actually sharing data. I guess that you are not sharing data with your competitors, or are you? Or you could be sharing more. I think the value here, what I'm after, is that everyone would probably win if things were shared more. That could be one insight on how to make things, I would say, better for all parties. And in order to make that happen, and to make, I would say, the single individual, which actually is the main source of the data, you wouldn't be able to operate any utility company if you just had a power plant. You also need consumers, someone that is using the power. So that could be one insight. I'm not sure where we are going to end up. Everyone speaks about AI and so on, but just being able to create that layer, I think that these kind of solutions could be part of that, because you incentivize people in a different way. You're not just consumers. And obviously demand and response and all that, I think that I believe that if you just connect things to the network, let's speak of this in terms of the internet or blockchain, if you just connect, things will happen. Like more people will find more use cases and be able to find new ideas. And at this point, and this is my base thesis, all energy resources in the network are just energy, which is the waste of, it's not worth anything. Energy is the wrong unit. It should be power. Do you agree? Because it's, okay, hear me out. We don't store energy in the wires. We actually transfer power, electricity. Everything is just in time. So the power that is produced is exactly the amount of power that we consume in the electricity network. Like we could introduce batteries and such, but the wires is what matters. And I think that this is also something that we haven't really, like the new market of electricity, if we think of what's coming, maybe it isn't about energy. Let's say in the future, you're not built for energy because energy is in abundance. We have all the energy we ever need, but it's when you use the power what is important. And in order to create that system, which would make more sense from the grid perspective, as I believe, and then we would need more technologies. So I'm just speculating and saying, but there will be new business models and use cases on top of things that we might be able to build. This is a bit visionary, sorry for this. Yeah.
Yeah, so probably visionary. I need to defend a little bit the data point. There is regulatory mandates on what sort of data we share. And we've actually went even as far as to, in an anonymized form, even share some of the data from the smart meters for academic purposes and so on. Not sure it's much worth, to be honest, so far, because there's not much you can do based on smart meter data usage that is not even because of anonymizing them. There's no location data with it. I'd still need to find someone who's really willing to pay a good sum of money for that data. But open to see that. Actually, we had a startup challenge just recently, and we're just looking into whether we can come up with interesting points. And just on your last thing, I know we might end up in a system where we have an abundance of energy, but we still have to get through some challenges until we're there.
I agree. And just to talk about the data point, I think there are different perspectives here. Either you're like collecting data from utility meters or we are collecting data points from within the network. There are several, I would say, Web 2 companies that are operating on a B2B level and selling data to utilities. Usually, like, just to give you an idea, if you have solar panels at home and you have the inverter is what converts the DC to AC, the utility companies today that wants to feed this data from the inverter into their like knowledge, that pays about €1 per month. And then we could probably name a couple of companies, but that's just a general pricing model. And why, if someone is paying €1 per month for that data, why aren't the user that is sharing that data being rewarded? Because that is not the case now.
You could also say this is part of the premium that feeds back into the system and is being redistributed over all users who are subsidizing the PV owner. But this is a philosophical debate, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think that the last question from me, okay, and then I'll move to the audience, is, so we talked about DePIN, we talked about innovative business models, and we talked about decentralized hardware, decentralized architectures. It's just from a kind of energy sector perspective, and we had a chat about this earlier. What do you see the main blockers in the adoption of DePIN as an innovative business model, and maybe just as an innovation as a concept? Do you see most of the problems to be we're not fully digitalized yet to accept it? Is it regulation? Is it a policy problem, or all of the above?
Ooh. When I think about it, if your question is, what is the barrier to adoption of DePIN, then I think the classic question that I'd ask is, what problem does it solve? And if, for some of the use cases we've just been speaking about, and maybe the data one is one that we could be looking closer into, whether this is one where there lies some potential, but when it just comes to coordinating the system, coordinating heat pumps, EVs, and so on, there's so many companies that have scaled already far beyond anything. Octopus Energy, 1.5 degrees in Germany. They didn't need DePIN to do that. And maybe it just isn't needed to solve some of those challenges. And that would be my question. If you can prove that DePIN can solve one of those challenges better than others, then that would be the entry door. But if you can't, then you can't.
Yeah, actually, because that's a good validation point. I think also dive back to DePIN. If there isn't a valid business idea without DePIN, you shouldn't do it. The DePIN itself, I think I speak also, but that I truly believe, it needs, and so Octopus Energy and others, they really validate the business idea. But if you, from the customer perspective, because I think that's I'm speaking in my own interest now, obviously, but if you want to participate in Octopus Energy, you need to be a customer of Octopus Energy. You can't be a customer of Axpo, right? Then you have DePIN as one approach to actually make this more, I would say, permissionless, trustless, and you shouldn't be able to you shouldn't worry too much about that part. The market should take care about that part. You as a user, you have some kind of resources, and you want them to be available for the market. Regardless of energy operator, regardless of country, regardless of whatever, then that's a DePIN approach. And yeah, there are loads of regulations that you need to adhere to, and loads of different, but should really the end user be responsible for knowing all this stuff and taking care of that? Shouldn't a player, such a DePIN project?
Your example of you have to be an Octopus Energy customer if you want to use their services is a valid point, but you need to also think of you're selling your energy, right? You have a PV panel on your rooftop. Even if you get a token for that, that's nice. But you also, if you're a Swiss customer, you're with a Swiss distribution utility, you will feed your solar power in there and you'll get a feed-in tariff as well. Are we duplicating now the rewards that those people get? No. There must be then a checks and balances, and somehow, okay, if you get your token for that, then you don't get your feed-in tariff, and I don't know. It might be the natural owner, sorry to say that, but for me, the natural owner of that customer relationship is the distribution utility that also knows what's going on with the system around and would be the one who you can trust.
Yeah, becoming a debate almost. But the thing is that doesn't need to be the same. You can have one utility company and there could be another company that is the balance authority. At least that's in the Nordics and so on. So it doesn't need to be black and white there. Could
Room for more discussion, I feel. Very cool. But let's maybe give the audience a chance, and then Apro is waiting. Garrett?
Maybe just a thought on the value of data. The question is probably like, at what level of granularity does it have a value? And who pays for it? And is it replacing something that is currently being paid or falsely paid? And so maybe also looking for analogies, maybe let's say in industrial engines where, for example, the suppliers can track the performance and then can maybe optimize the maintenance. But then, of course, question like whether the energy infrastructure or the electricity consumption is the right proxy, or whether just a connected device or end appliance will be the part that delivers that information.
Yeah, that's the question, right? As I said, the level that we get from a smart meter data output, 15-minute electricity consumption profiles, we haven't seen much, and maybe it's different in the Nordics now, and maybe this is something that at some point we'll see in Switzerland as well. And then, honestly speaking, we're fully state-owned, so if we get a bit more money from data, it will also flow back to the society. But I haven't seen someone come and really offer a lot of money for that data yet. I think the only one profiting from that data is currently us in terms of planning the grid.
Hi, as an individual, how would I be seen to be green? Like in terms of digitizing the environment, how do you envision that working? Because it seems like the DePIN really relies on that sort of esteem and shame we derive from locality.
I can start. How green you are in terms of your electricity consumption is something that your local utility today can tell you. They buy a certain mix of electricity. They can give you an exact amount of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour multiplied with your consumption. And
more publicly, like, how would my brother-in-law know? That kind of thing.
do you want your brother-in-law to know how green your electricity is?
Yeah, it's an example, right? Yeah. That's what the idea is. When we digitize the environment, we get people to do these things. Somebody talked about earlier how they were setting up hotspots and things like that. A lot of times people do that as a service to their community, but they're also seen as being doing that as a service to their community. So how do you envision that possibly happening with what we're talking about energy in terms of carbon footprint?
Yep.
It's all well enough that the DNO knows, but nobody.
I can just speak of that from my perspective. Like, if we put things on chain, make it transparent, like obviously the question will be easier to answer, at least also to verify if you trust the system. So that's one thing. Creating like an explorer of open data, which has verifiable solar PV installations, regardless of distributor and network and country. But there are, this is just a side point, but I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I read an article that you're actually able to use data analysis to predict the carbon intensity of the grid just by high resolution data of the frequency. You can actually see, depending on the frequency variations in the grid, you can predict pretty well how much carbon is in the network, depending on which resources are producing energy. So that plays into the data part as well. The more you know about the grid frequency in the local ends, and probably also in high granularity, you can also use that data to predict the amount of, let's say, renewable production in that area from the data analysis perspective. There are research actually published within this.
Interesting. Any maybe last or second last question?
Guys, very insightful conversation. I have a number of rhetoric questions and one idea for you all. If we take, let's say, medical profession, it takes 12, 15 years studies, internship. When we hear with debates about climate, energy, it's mostly politicians with liberal arts degrees and very few engineering scientists who understand first how solar panel is made. So you take coal power plants, you take little bit of forced labor, everything is hidden in China, then you put it on a rooftop in Switzerland, it will heat environment, and climate is a local phenomenon by definition. Yeah, so very lot of controversies that require really engineering, knowledge, and simple guesses doesn't work. So I spent 30 years, practical work, academic work, consulting. So I would suggest everyone to look, there is no energy. So we have 600 million people in Africa, and for them, it's an essential commodity. So whatever great solution, digitalization, whatever distributed power generation, solar panels, they produce much more energy in Africa rather than in Sweden or Switzerland. So it takes more energy to manufacture solar panel than it will produce in Switzerland. In Africa, yes. And also to your question, what is the value of data? In Africa, people don't have money. So they need to find like $5 to pay for charging their mobile device. So where they use prepaid smart meters. And who is the customer is essentially financial or whatever, be it decentralized finance or centralized finance. They will pay for this exact data, so to assure that guy consumed, duly paid, charged, and then it's a great opportunity for you. Stop destroying well-functioning energy system in Europe and go where demand is. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Some controversy. Do you want to answer, or you take it to the apro?
I will just very quickly. The very well-functioning electricity system, at least in the UK, the cost of balancing is around £20 million. So it's not extremely well functioning.
It was 20 years ago.
Yeah, but you change the generation, and then so it's a transitionary period, and it's fine for things not to be perfect from day one in a transition, as long as we kind of work together. So as long as we kind of work together towards the kind of end goal, but I'm ready to carry on with that in the apparel.
Thanks a lot. I think that's almost a natural close. Thank you very much to the panelists and for sharing your insights. I think what I take away is we are still early. There is still some stuff to be found out, and that's why we are doing this. We are on the frontier of innovation here, and thanks a lot for everyone joining. And now the well and often mentioned APRO is happening, so please join in and support it today by AEGIS and the Solana Foundation. And if you liked what you saw, there are a ton of more events under this QR code. Join us and hope to see you back soon.